Thank you. Thank you all very much. So first I want to start by thanking Hosnul, MDEC, and the entire organizing team. I'm not always the easiest person to get in touch with and get to places, but they got me here great, so I want to say thank you. So for today, we're doing some... I want to talk a little bit about, I called the presentation Bass, Blaster Beams, and Box Office, because I'm going to talk a little bit about three things. And the goal is not to give a technical conversation about how we do the work, but to talk a little bit about what happens behind the scenes and the sort of the human process of getting work done at the level that we work at. So I'll start with a brief demo of our work, just to give those of you who are unfamiliar a sense of some of what we do and the level we work at. So a little bit about history, just because context I think is everything when you talk a little bit about what you do and how you do things. So we started in 2006. I had been working as a filmmaker and out of desperation took post-production on a film I was doing to Beijing, China. And I began working with a group of teachers at a school who would sort of freelance for me on getting work done. And those teachers, after about 2 years, became the core of Bass. And so we officially started the company in 2006. Today, this is our 10th anniversary. I think next week or the week after in Variety, they're doing a nice little special for us. And you know, in the intro and the video that as you came in, it said, you know, the wizards, the visual effects wizards behind. And so I'll give you a quick glimpse of what was behind the wizard's curtain when we started. And so that was the whole company. And this was, you know, in a building that about a month after this photograph was taken, the floor caved in and the building collapsed into the Beijing subway system. And we lost all our computers. That should have been a warning to me about the visual effects business. It was not. We dug out the computers and kept going. And as a side note, something I did not know when I took this photograph was that this young woman here on my right would 3 years later become my wife. And so it is very much, and of the people in this room, of the initial 12, 6 of them married each other. So you can imagine what company meetings are like. We had a little bit of one last night. And so it was this Bass from its very inception has always been a very close-knit family-style company. And in fact, we speak of employees as joining our family, and it's been a big part of what we've done. I'd love to take all the credit for it. In truth, and Haznel mentioned John Hughes. John was a mentor of mine and a terrific human being. And seeing how John built his company was really inspiration for Bing and I both. So we very much sort of looked to John, and we would sometimes spend dinner with him in the summer when he and his wife Pauline would come to Beijing, and he was very gracious with us. So this is where we started. There were 12. The one news is that we're now at about 500. We've grown a lot, even since our last bio. And that's largely, and we'll get to this later on, due to the growth of the market in China. And so I'll speak a little bit about that growth. But today, the company has, oops, there we go. Today, the company, we started our main office in Beijing. We then built an outsourcing office in Wuxi. We're not allowed to send work to third parties, so we actually built our own sort of in-sourcing office where we do a lot of our prep work. A year and a half ago, we opened our third office in Xiamen. And then last year, we started in Los Angeles. And that is very much a client relations team. So we have a supervisor, producer, and coordinator in Los Angeles full-time, working mostly on TV projects. And then now Malaysia. So we've been in talks with MDEC and working with the artist community and talking with artists on a global basis and about opening in Malaysia. And so that'll be moving ahead next month. So we're very excited about it. And our goal is always and this is the goal we set for ourselves as a company, was to work at the highest level, to always take on things that scared us, to always do things that we thought could break the company, because when we did it and it didn't break the company, we felt more confident about the next challenge. And you'll see that in some of what I show you going forward. Clients, the one thing that's unique about Base, we have, and it's unique to, I think there's unique opportunities in Asia. And again, this is, some of why I'm sharing this is for those of you who have companies or are looking at businesses, is to see sort of how we've been able to balance our structure. So we have a client list that runs both in the United States and in China. Our work is roughly divided 50-50 between Chinese clients and American clients, Hollywood clients. And then we also have a fair balance between television and feature film. And that's also really important, largely because the industry is cyclical and trend-driven. And so by keeping sort of 1 foot in 3 different boats, or 1 foot in each boat, which gives us an extra foot, it allows us to stay agile, because sometimes the Hollywood system will slow down, films get delayed, television seems to chug onward. And then in China, it's a very chaotic marketplace. So it allows us to have some balance. Along the way, we've been able to pick up some pretty cool awards. And this is something we're pretty proud of. And it's not so much about bragging that we have all these awards, but it's proof that a young group of artists in a place that was never, people don't initially think of China as a very creative place, right? On the world stage, no one says, oh, China is an incredibly creative place. We disagree. We have been able to build an incredibly talented creative team. And so this is sort of our little way of saying, look, we can do it. And so I'll go through the Emmys. For Star Wars, there was a VS Award. Star Wars and Captain America were both nominated for Academy Awards. Star Wars picked up a BAFTA, and a few weeks ago, we won a Hong Kong Film Award for Monster Hunt. And we've been really good. We nominate different artists, and so the awards are sort of spread through the team. But it's a great testament to the fact that it can be done. In Hollywood, you'll hear a lot of naysayers that creative work can't leave. And we're here to say that, what we find in our talent, and we have a bunch of Malaysian artists in our office in Beijing now, what we find is they can do anything you try, and if you give them the trust and the training, they will achieve for you. And it's been a great experience for us. So when we get to our early work, not very good movies. I'm sorry to the directors who made them. When we started out, we took whatever we could get. Razortooth famously includes a scene of me being killed by an eel that my staff have now gotten hold of and play pretty much anytime I get up to speak anywhere. I kind of hold up, is that you? I'm not a good actor. And so we worked on these very low budget television movies in the early days. We did, by 2007, we had graduated into HBO projects. And so HBO gave us Recount and Grey Gardens. And those projects were really the gateway to much of where we are today. That led to the Pacific. And I've told the story a lot, but the story there was we were doing some really simple cleanup work on the Pacific. We were asked to come in one day to deliver our shots. While I was there, another vendor failed on the biggest shots of the show. And there was a real panic in the editing room and amongst the visual effects supervisor, John Sullivan. And I was just kind of sitting in the back, and we'd been doing all the paint cleanup stuff. And they were stunned and didn't know what to do. And I just said, you know, we can do that. And there was this dead silence in the room. And they looked at me and said, what? I said, yeah, I think we can do that. I think we can do those shots. And we made a deal that they would give us the footage. We would go and try it. If they didn't use it, they wouldn't pay us. And so while they kept the primary vendor going, we worked pretty much every artist in the company for about 8 weeks. And in 8 weeks, we finished 3 shots that took another company a year. And they used our work, and for that, HBO was kind enough to nominate us for an Emmy, which we won. And that began a series of projects with HBO, Boardwalk Empire, which got our 2nd Emmy, and Black Sails, which we got our 3rd. And along that process, we became sort of a high-end TV company. So, True Detective, last year's Agent Carter, and we're now sort of, we don't take a lot of work because it's challenging on the timelines, but it's now become a real core of our business and a great way for us to start. We also, obviously, we're in China. So we've been really fortunate to work with some of the biggest directors, Chen Kai-ge, Gordon Chen, Lu Chuan, Zhang Yimou, Jia Zhangke, Ning Hao, Jean-Jacques Arnaud, and Lu Chuan again. And so we've been able to build a really good relationship with some of the top directors in China. It's a tough business in China because the directors change a lot. And we've had to learn to sort of adapt pretty quickly. But that's been a real cornerstone of the business. All of that came to a head last summer when we worked on a movie called Monster Hunt. And Monster Hunt was the biggest job we've ever done. It was about 1,000 shots. We had about a year to do it. This is another China story. Lead actor got arrested for narcotics, was banned from cinema. The producer then had to recast the role, reshoot every scene, and then we had to redo about 2/3 of the work. And it was more heartache than you can imagine, tons of fear. The movie went into release without anyone really understanding it. Famously, I showed a distributor who looked at me and said, I don't know what it is. The night of the premiere, the distributor looked at us and said, I think you'll be disappointed. And the movie went on to make 2.4 billion RMB, about 385 million US dollars, at the time the highest grossing film in China, and very much defined our company and was a real source of success. The other thing it taught me is success in the visual effects business is a double-edged sword, because it also meant that every artist in my company had a job offer. And so, we had to then endure some of that. It worked out, but it was a great experience. In the coming weeks, we'll be starting the sequel, and this will be a very interesting process. We're excited about it. The big change in our company came about from the Pacific, and that was when Lucasfilm, a gentleman named Dennis Cooper, and Gretchen Libby heard about the Emmy on the Pacific and that a Chinese company had won an Emmy, they immediately reached out to us. They flew to see us in April of 2010, spent about 45 minutes in my office, and then very abruptly left. They were supposed to stay for 2 days. They said, we have to leave. I thought it was kaput. They weren't interested. That night from the airport, they sent us our first project to bid, which was IM number 4. And since 2010, we've had a great relationship with them. Over the course of the following 2 years, into 2012, we negotiated, because ILM have lots of lawyers. And they had more lawyers at the time than I had staff. In May of 2012, we signed a strategic alliance agreement. I signed it on May 4th, which I didn't understand. May the 4th be with you. So so they're called like, oh, it was so great, you signed on May the 4th. I was like, what? Like, May the 4th be with you. I was like, yeah. So I wasn't as geeked out on Star Wars at that particular moment. The relationship led to us working on some of the, obviously ILM is an incredible company. They have incredible talent. They have an incredible history. They've been great partners for us. And it opened the door for us to work on some of the biggest movies in Hollywood. And ILM were super partners when it came to being thoughtful partners. And what that meant was Super 8, we might have done 60 shots. Ghost Protocol, maybe 80. G.I. Joe, 120. Pac Rim was an anomaly, about 300. Captain America was then maybe 200. And so they very carefully stepped us up, both in complexity and volume, so that we could be strong and successful partners. So whenever I talk about the successive base, I always have to mention ILM, because a lot of it came down to their foresight and their patience to allow us to develop into being the company that we are today. And we're always grateful for that. Obviously, the biggest thing for us from a Hollywood perspective has been the last 2 years. And it's been the birth of the new Star Wars experience. And it was something that, had you told me 10 years ago that I'd be working on Star Wars, I would have laughed and said never. And now it's very much a part of our lives, and it's a daily part of the company and our existence and how we plan and focus. So as part 2, I'm going to talk a little bit about blaster beams. And specifically, this is a look at some of our work on Star Wars: The Force Awakens. And again, this isn't meant to be technical. It's more, what did we have to do to get the work done from a human perspective? And so, first I'll say Lucasfilm have again been extraordinary partners. I always make sure that I give them a big shout out. They had a vision for us from the very beginning about working on the film and the series of films. Kathleen Kennedy came to Beijing in April of 2013 and announced that we'd be working on the films, and has been fantastic in supporting us. And then for me, obviously Star Wars has been, I was one of those kids, I was 7 years old when the movie came out. I was a Star Wars geek, then less so, now more so. So it was an incredible experience to be invited in. A little aside story, in a moment when Lucasfilm was not sure about partnering with our company, I was given a call that the board was going to vote at the end of the week, and it may not go well. And I asked my mom to ship something to San Francisco. I flew into San Francisco, and I went into a meeting with the board member who was reluctant to trust a company in China. And I slid across the table a little wallpaper-bound book. And when you open the cover, it said, Snoopy Goes Star Wars by Chris Bremble. And it was a book I wrote as a 4th grader. It was the first creative writing I ever did, and I had basically retold The Empire Strikes Back with Snoopy, which I still think is a great idea. And I'm trying to push. So So I was a kid. I was a geek, and I was such a geek that I was even one of the empty boxers. And I don't know if this is known in Malaysia. The toys sold out so fast for Star Wars for Christmas in 1977. They allowed you to buy the early bird certificate package, which was an empty box. And so on Christmas morning, 1977, I opened an empty box. And all it had inside, and if you read the thing, it says, this includes a certificate. And you mail it in, and then you wait. And I don't know a 7-year-old on the planet that thinks that that's a reasonable and fair thing to do, especially on Christmas. So there's a photograph I couldn't find, I tried to find it, of me just in tears on Christmas morning in 1977. I eventually did meet Howard Rothman, who's the man responsible for the empty box, and chastised him at a cocktail party in Beijing. So I feel like I've gotten even. But that's my affection for Star Wars. So for us, when Disney bought Lucasfilm and announced the Star Wars plan, we were crazy excited. Everyone was jumping through. Now, at the time they announced it was going to be one movie every 2 years. I think some of you may know it's now one movie every year. So there's a Star Wars basically being made every year for the foreseeable future. There's plans to potentially make more. I think the audience reception to the first was fantastic. So we were over the moon, and as a team. And so I want to share a quick demo of some of the work we did on Star Wars. And so I'll walk through some of the key work we did and share a little bit about sort of, and it comprised not the most iterated shot, but by all means probably the hardest shot we've ever done as a company. And that was this work here. We got a phone call from Pat Tupac, who is the ILM supervisor, and he said, look, I'm thinking of giving you something hard. Can you do it? And we didn't know what it was, and so we said, well, how hard? And he said, really, really hard. And then we said, yeah, because we're kind of dumb. And he said, okay, I'm sending it over, take a look. And our producer, when she saw the footage, looked and said, you said we could do this? Yeah, I think I did. And so we embarked on this series of shots. And so here is our demo of the work. And as you can see, there was a fair amount of sort of things we normally do. But when it came to getting the TIE fighter to fall into the sand, it was a huge amount of particles. And I think we were sort of nearing the trillions. We ended up having to buy I think they're about $25,000 workstations so that we could cook the particle simulations. If any of you know Houdini, you know what that is like. And so when you do particle simulations, you usually have to cook them on a single processor. It's not something that can be distributed because they have to simulate the interaction. And as we got closer and closer to the deadline, Bad Robot were getting nervous because the shot wasn't looking as good as they had hoped it would. And they began to talk about potentially taking it away from us and saying, look, maybe this was too hard for you. Maybe this is something you shouldn't do. We'll take it back and ILM can take over the shot. And this is where my team kind of jumped in. So we had sort of an all-hands meeting, and we said, look, we don't want that to happen. We got to figure out a way to do this. Unfortunately, that phone call came 2 days before the Victory Day Parade in October 1st of 2015. Or no, August 8th, maybe. I think it was August 8th, that's right. And our neighborhood was slated to be shut down for the parade. Because one thing that's unique about China, when they have a big parade, nobody's invited. So they closed all the neighborhoods on the parade route and all the neighborhoods where the military positioned themselves for the parade. And so our neighborhood was set to be closed. And that meant all the buildings were shut down. That meant no traffic, barricades up, could not come freely. And our landlord said to us, you got to leave the building. And so we had ILM on one hand saying, look, we got to see something on Monday or Tuesday if you're going to keep the shot. You got to show us something. We had a building that was going to be closed. We have a young effects artist from Norway. His name's Stien. And we went to Stien with a novel solution. We asked him to move into the building and stay locked in the building for 4 days. We gave him 3 computers to do his simulations. He only made one request, and that was, could he bring his girlfriend? We created a nice little care package of food. We created a nice care package of water. Our building strangely removes toilet paper for holidays, so we had to give him that too. And so we left Stien in our office with his girlfriend for 4 days. At the end of those 4 days, shots were beautiful. He really crushed it. Awesome job. And I went to give him a hug and said thank you. And then I looked at him and I said, by the way, because they had a mattress. I went in early and they had a mattress set up sort of in the middle of our office. We gave him an air mattress. And I said, by the way, you do know there's cameras everywhere, right? I have never seen anyone so afraid in my life. And I said, don't worry. Before I came to see you, I erased everything. So we do. So we have for those of you who are in the business, you know that the MPAA have very rigid security protocols, and so we have cameras everywhere. You can, and they're all like very high res. You have to be able to see people's faces. So anyway, so I said to Stan, I said, we have some high res stuff that I deleted, but you're gonna work for me for a long time, right? Right? So. That was how this shot got done. We locked someone in our office for 4 days. And had we not done that, this never would have been ours. And so last, the final battle. And this is some great work and subtle work that we did. And I'll show you, again, the sequence of the work. So this was the ultimate sort of climax of the movie, and it was interesting for security purposes. We didn't do all the shots, so in order to keep everyone guessing, we sort of did every third shot, and that way no studio, no facility actually knew how the movie ended. And because you'll notice there's also no Kylo Ren shots, so we didn't do any of Kylo Ren's lightsaber, which remains a secret sauce, how that's done. So this is a quick look at some of the breakdowns. What made the sequence quite complicated was that this, and you'll see in a couple of the breakdowns, this was a set. This wasn't shot in a forest, this was shot on a stage. And we ended up having to extend that in a lot of the shots. And it was actually, I'm quite proud of the team because it was really subtle work. And it was little things from we added a few trees to get some more color and light. Added snow to give a little bit more interaction with the feet because, again, you know, J.J. Abrams is he's a great eye. And so he would say, oh, I don't think the snow is moving well enough. I want to get some more snow moving around with his feet. You know, we augmented wounds. Added some of the burn, and then here you can see again how we built out the background and extended the scene, which was a complicated work in terms of tracking and in terms of getting that done. But it was interesting because we would look at these shots and we were confused. We didn't really know what the story was or what was happening or who was fighting who. But team did a great job, and we were super excited when we all got to see it. So that gives you a quick look at the film. Now this is my favorite plate from the whole movie. It's kind of dark, so if you can dim the lights, you can see it better. But this is what we would see when the work would come to us. And I just loved it because it really speaks to the care and the craft that went into making the film. And you can see the puppeteers, and you know they would do this. I mean, we would see that, you know, take 72, and they would do this over and over again. So I'm greatly appreciative of Kathleen and JJ and the Lucasfilm and ILM teams, the people at Disney, for allowing us to go on that journey with them, because it was very much a journey of love. So on to part 3. As we wind down box office. So to start, Star Wars, $2.06 billion globally, including about 900 million in the US, broke tons of records. I think there were about 9 records it broke. If you include in the likely revenue from licensing and merchandising on the film, it's very likely that Disney has nearly paid off its acquisition of Lucasfilm on the first film. So it was Bob Iger is a very intelligent man and made a great and wonderful business decision. And this speaks to, some of you may be familiar with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg's sort of lamenting the big movie era, that there are these big, huge visual effects blockbusters, and that this is a problem with cinema. And I actually sort of have to say I disagree. It seems to me that audiences want this. When audiences go into big theaters, they want really big experiences. And when audiences want well-told, well-crafted characters, well-told stories and well-crafted characters, they will turn to television. They turn to Netflix, they turn to HBO, they turn to Stars, etc. And that this is sort of the new media landscape for us, and that you have to be big. Obviously, as well as Star Wars did, one of the challenges is it did not do as well as hoped in China. And Bunny Bears 3, not a great movie. Not a bad movie. Anyone here work on that? Not a bad movie, but Bunny Bears 3, and so its last weekend, it got beaten by a pretty small movie. And this speaks to some of the challenges that we all face as China becomes a bigger and bigger player in the global media stage. And I'm sure many of you in the media industry have been following the news, whether it's in acquisitions or otherwise. The world used to be North America and international. We're sort of two sort of goggles through which we viewed the world. And over the last 18 months, there is now a third. And so China as a territory, as a market, is now a third of the world. And that isn't going to change. It may soon be half the world. And so this is what's really changing the visual effects industry and the media industry. And I'll talk a little bit about how it's changing things for us. So these are some graphs that we've done internally, and this shows the blue is total box office, yellow is admissions, green is the number of screens, and the dark blue is the number of films made per year. And you can see clearly what the trends are, and that there's been an explosive growth in China in terms of both the number of films being made and released, as well as the overall accessibility to see those films. There's also been another trend that isn't included here, which is discounting. And so in China, there's heavy, heavy discounting on tickets, which has largely driven the industry. And so one of the things we're all waiting to see how that discounting tapers off and if the industry continues. Our guess is that it does, because when we talk to people in our focus groups, they tell us that the discounting is great, but they're still going to go see the movie. If it costs $2 or 20 RMB more, they'll still buy a ticket if they want to buy a ticket. As reference, in 2010, I did a college tour in China. I asked auditoriums of college students how many had seen a movie in theaters in the last 4 weeks, and I would usually get 1 or 2 hands. When I did that last year, I got more than 60%, 70% of the audience. So amongst the young audience members in China, huge uptick in theatrical attendance. And if I go back, we think that 2015 is the peak. We think in 2015 the growth percentage peaked, but we're still going to see pretty significant growth going forward. And so we don't anticipate this lopping off. We think that until about 2026, about 10 more years, you're going to see pretty consistent growth in the media industry in China, specifically the theatrical industry. And when we look at what that means for us, we look at the premium visual effects market as our core business. And that means movies that want the highest quality. So when I say premium visual effects, it's not movies that want visual effects at the lowest price. It's people that are saying we want a quality picture because we want to engage a large audience. This is a quick look at what we see happening over the next 4 years. And we're pretty confident out to 2018, mostly because we already have those projects in hand. So we've already signed contracts for movies that will be released out to 2018. And so we see a pretty explosive growth in demand. It's one of the reasons why we're coming to Malaysia. We're actually unable to develop talent as quickly in China as we would like. And so we need to make sure that we're expanding our horizons for talent, because our industry is all driven by talent. If you want to look another way at the size of the market, Monster Hunt, which we worked on in August, finished at $385 million in box office. The Mermaid, same demographic, identical actually on a percentage basis, $526 million in box office. A 28% growth in the size of the market in 6 months. And that gives you a sense of sort of right now the trajectory of what China's on. And what this has done is that these movies have kicked off a visual effects bonanza. Because now everyone thinks that the way to get an audience is to deliver spectacle. This is something that Hollywood has learned over the last 5 years. Some people complain about it, but the truth of the matter is, the bigger the movie, the more likely you're going to get an opening. And the more likely you get an opening, the better your international turns out to be, the better all your ancillaries. So the studios are very much driven to put as much spectacle into their movies. This has now come to China. This is problematic because worldwide, there is not enough talent. 3 years ago, the visual effects industry was written off as a terrible industry and dead. Companies went bankrupt, shuttered, closed, shrank, and 3 years later, problem. The problem is, one, the industry pushed a lot of people out. A lot of people were burnt out, unhappy with the way companies were run, unhappy with the general dynamics of the industry. And then there's also another issue, which is VR. So a lot of the artists that we know that are sort of very top artists have migrated into the VR space, which is wide open. And no crazy hours, no rules. Everyone's exploring and experimenting. There's no monetization process, so there's a feeling that it's a sort of luxurious life. And so, problem. So as there's a world shortage, what's happening to base in China? Weta, DNEG, MPC, they're all coming to China to hire artists for the first time. So we have 28 alumni that are now working at some of the biggest studios. And it's painful for us, but we're also really proud of the fact that these artists are making it into what we consider the big leagues. Because base is still kind of a tier 2 company. And so it's exciting for us that they're making it, but this problem is real. And it presents opportunities. When we look at what's coming, franchises, more and more. So you've got Star Wars every year, Transformers every year now, Avengers every year, Batman, Superman, Marvel, the DC Comics universe, 2 movies a year, Marvel, 2 movies a year. You've got Avatar, 1 every year, going into production, coming out in a few years. X-Men, trying to keep up, 1 every year, every other year. Planet of the Apes, 1 every other year. Spider-Man, 1 every other year. Harry Potter's back. Bond, new Bond coming. And so the demand in the international marketplace has never been higher for talent. And it's also sparking real challenges for those companies. The wages in Vancouver have gone up 20% in the last 12 months. Artists at Vancouver studios are dropping their Wacom tablets in the middle of a shot, getting up, walking out, going across the street, and getting a 20% raise. They don't finish the work because it's that hot a market. I was speaking to one of the vice presidents of visual effects at one of the studios who said very clearly they will not send work to a studio that's only in Vancouver because they think it has a failure risk. So we went from one crisis in 2013, and now we're going to go into another crisis, which is talent. for us, we're sort of tied to the Star Wars, Transformers, and Avengers franchises through our ILM relationship, and so we'll be working on those. And Monster Hunt is starting its sequel late this summer, and so even for us, it's a real challenge to go out into the marketplace and find talent. I think this is what provides Malaysia with a really significant opportunity. I've been back and forth now. I think this is my 7th or 8th trip. And I've been delighted every time I've been here. I've met lots of really wonderful young people who are super excited. We have a group of artists that formerly worked here. They came, and so 2 years ago we hired a group of artists from Malaysia, and they came up to Beijing, and they've been with us for the last 2 years. They're family now. We trust them. We know them. We like them. And they'll be migrating back to open up a new office here and start looking for talent. So the visual effects business is tough, it's hard, but I think that there's, with the VR revolution, which I think will take some time to get energy, with the television business exploding and doing more and more animation and TV animation, I think that there's going to be tremendous opportunities for young talent. And so we're really positive about the future, and we're really positive about our experience coming into Kuala Lumpur. So I want to thank you very much for being patient, and I wish you the best day, and I want to thank Haznul and everyone else for allowing me to come and speak. Thank you.